The shir is dedicated to Ilu Nishon Bat Yachaya Bat Chana Sarah. That's the daughter of Benji Rietti. Today is her yortzeit. They're coming today. I don't think they made it, right? They didn't make it today. They're coming mamish tonight. I don't know if they made landing. We wanted to speak at this is basically the Shabbat Shuvah, as we know, and I was requested that it's hard for women to come, A, but B, I wanted to make something very practical. In the olden days, I used to speak on Shabbat Shuvah like a nice halachic topic with an iyun, and then I realized why do that? It wasn't so as productive. We tried to do something that's extremely practical, to make something that we can learn and how we can do some practical Kabbalah and Nefesh, something we can take away for our Yom Kippur to be able to do something. Okay, so I'm going to try to make it as practical as possible, also give examples, B'ezrat Hashem. But it's important to, no one can pinpoint each specific person. Lev Yudei Amar is not sure. Every single person knows their individuality. They know what they need for themselves. So I'm going to throw out maybe here and there examples, but obviously each one has his own individual things that they have to work on. But you're supposed to take the message of what we're trying to get out here. I'm going to start off with a story that you might not like. It's an interesting story. Is it true or is it not true? It's brought down by the Rishonim. The Shita Mekubetzes and Nedarim brings it in the Tiferet Yisrael in the end of Kedushin. I said you might not know what I'm talking about, but it doesn't matter. But Bikaron, they bring down a Maisa, which is, there are some that disagree that it existed. It's a type of Midrash Kazeh. But the message is very clear, and that's why I felt it was important to speak it out. Seder, this is the story. As we all know, Moshe Rabbeinu was a very big man. He was a big man. He took us out. He did a lot of fancy things. He took us out of Mitzrayim. He took us out of the splitting of seas, doing a lot of makot, etc. They were wandering in the Midbar for 40 years, as we all know. The Jews were in the Midbar for 40 years. And here it has it in the Midrash. It brings down that there was a king that said, I have to see who this Moshe Rabbeinu person is. I have to meet him. I have to know what's about him. What is his character traits? What's he about? So he sent one of his greatest artists, one of his Tzairim. Yes, believe it or not, back then there was no camera, no iPhone to take a picture, and they actually had to draw the picture with their hand. And he drew the picture he found Moshe Rabbeinu wandering on the Midbar. That's already a miracle in itself. But anyway, somehow they found Moshe Rabbeinu in the Midbar, and he drew a picture of his face, of Moshe Rabbeinu's face, and he brought it back to the king. The king said, wow, okay, he now has a picture of Moshe Rabbeinu. Could you imagine if we can get a hold of this picture? It was an incredible thing to be able to see what Moshe Rabbeinu looked like. But I think most people think he looks like the guy in the movie, right? Whatever his name was. So he went to his chachamim, he went to his wise men, and he showed him the pictures, and they said, Chochmat HaPartzuf, which is a real chochmah, we believe in this chochmah. There is such a thing as studying a person's face, and you can figure out many things about him. There is such an idea behind palm reading and Chochmas HaPartzuf. It has to be done right, not fakers, and it has to be real, but there is such a thing. So they went and they studied the face and all the crevices and the way it looked. And they said, look, I don't know, we're afraid to say, but he doesn't look like such a great guy. He looks like he's a person who's a little bit of a temper, or impatient maybe to a certain extent, and maybe he's not always the best of people. So he got very upset at him. This is Moshe Rabbeinu you're talking about, the man who gave the Aseret Dibra. This is the man who took us out of Mitzrayim. And he said, it can't be such a thing. Like I said, I wouldn't quote such a thing, obviously, but it's quoted in a few places, this idea. And it's because of that idea, that detail. I just said that some people disagree with the story. But anyways, so that's what they said. So the king said, okay, it must be, they started having an argument, it must be the guy who drew the picture doesn't know what he's doing. He obviously has no idea how to draw a picture. So they went to him and he said, I'm telling you, I promise you, I did it the way exactly. I got every detail of his face. I did it as best as I could. I drew a picture of him like I was supposed to do. Obviously, a vikuach, they knew someone's head was going to be chopped off by the king, so they wanted to figure out what to do. So the king said, that's it, I'm going in on my own. I'm going to go on my own, I'm going to make my own, I'm going to figure it out on my own who this person is. He went, the king went, and he found Moshe Rabbeinu in the Midbar. He got out his ways, he went down, he typed in Moshe Rabbeinu, he got him, and he found him in the middle of the Midbar with his 3 million people. He went to his oil and he bowed down to Moshe Rabbeinu. It says he gave him a tremendous honor. And then he asked him, he looked at the picture, he looked at him and said, wow, this is exact. The picture was fantastic. So he says, he told Moshe Rabbeinu the whole story. He says, obviously I see my chachamim, my wise men are a bunch of idiots. They obviously don't know what they're talking about. This is what they said in this. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, no, they are absolutely correct. That's the story goes, that they're absolutely correct. You should know, I was born with certain traits and these type of things, but I worked for 80 solid years to be able to do, and that's why Moshe is the Mefarnes. He's the Ish Elokim. He's the one that was able to, Moser Nefesh, he did everything only for Klal Yisrael. Patient with all the impatience of Bnei Israel, all the trials that they put him through. And we see what a tremendous man he was. And he was able to get to the places that he was able to get. That's what it says. And the place where he was able to reach was only from there. That's what the end of the Midrash more or less says. But the message over here is incredible. Like I said, you want to believe the story or not, it doesn't bother me, take your choice. But the message is absolutely incredible. A person can reach and be even a Moshe Rabbeinu, if he really wants to a certain extent, if he knows that he knows how to use his kochot, whatever those kochot are, if they're a little bit more to the left, a little bit more to the right. I don't mean to vote for the left, I'm not a big left person, but I mean to say, no matter what type of midah your strength is, where your weaknesses are, doesn't make a difference. A person is able to reach an incredible amount of heights, an incredible type of a place that a person is able to reach to. That's why the Rambam writes in Hilchot Shuvah, he writes every person can be a tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu. He can be an Eved Hashem like Moshe Rabbeinu. So Rabbi Wasserman says, what are you talking? Everyone can be like Moshe Rabbeinu. No one was ever like Moshe Rabbeinu. No one ever will be like Moshe Rabbeinu. You can't be like Moshe Rabbeinu. It says in the Torah, he was the greatest anav, the biggest humble person. Even though it says, according to this midrash, that he wasn't born that way, he made himself into the most humble person. And he was the biggest navi, prophet that ever existed. And here you are telling me that you could be like Moshe Rabbeinu. So says Rabbi Wasserman. It means that everyone with what he did, Moshe Rabbeinu, was take every koach in his body, every strength, and he made it an Eved Hashem. He worked it towards working Hashem. You take your strength. No, it's not going to be Moshe Rabbeinu. But if you take the capabilities that you have and use it to its fullest, then you will be equal to the Darga Kebiyochel of Moshe Rabbeinu. You're not going to be a Moshe Rabbeinu, but those potentials that you acquiesced, that you received at birth, those capabilities, and you go ahead and use it to be an Eved Hashem, Masha Kana Eved Kana Rabbi, whatever I have is only to do for the right thing. So then you will be able to reach incredible heights. Okay, that's the Yesod that is brought down based on this midrash. But here is where the message that I want to get to is. And this will take a couple parts of understanding, but if you follow this building block, you'll see this is an incredible idea for how we can do tshuva properly. The Rambam writes in Nuchas Tshuva in Parakeh, Iker zeh Iker gadol hu amud haTorah ve'amitzvah. The Iker, if you think about all of Judaism, all of the Torah, what's the most important thing? I think if we would go and take votes here, it would just take too long. What you think, if you would channel, what's the most important fundamental that we know in Judaism? So we'll say the oneness of Hashem and all that. Says the Rambam, he says, what wonder is Shenemar natati lefanecha yom et hachayim v'et hatov, et hamavet v'et hara. I gave you good and bad. I gave you death and life. What did I give you? V'kotav re'enochi noten lefnechem, a bracha ve'aklala, blessing and curse. Harishut biyetchem v'kol sheyachpotz adam lasot mimaisa bnei adam oseh bein tovim rabim. There is nothing more that is more fundamental to our religion, but in general, as we're going to expand on, to the idea of free choice. Free choice is the foundations of everything that we walk on, and you're going to see how far we're going to take this, more than you even think. And he says that's why, and he brings many examples to the idea of free choice, but everything is without it. And if you don't believe in it, then you're denied the whole entire Torah. There's no idea of schar va'onish, of reward and punishment, and there's nothing to go about it. And he brings the pasuk, famous pasuk that we read last week, 2 weeks ago before Rosh Hashanah, and that is the famous pasuk of Renatan Tatechem et Hachayim et Hamavet Ubacharta B'Chayim. The pasuk goes ahead and tells us, please choose life. That's where Coca-Cola got the expression from. Choose life. Choose go. B'Charta B'Chayim. Choose life. Go ahead and choose the right thing. You read a pasuk and you go, there's the end of the Torah, right? If you know, we're right at the end of the Torah here. We read a whole entire Torah. 613 mitzvahs have been gone. We went through already. We went through a whole entire thing, and now it's telling me choose the good side. In Kol Kavod, I knew that. That much I could have guessed. I don't know if I needed a pasuk to tell me to choose life, to focus on Ubacharta B'Chayim. Choose the good side. Don't choose death. Don't choose bad things. Choose good things. Chazak Baruch, maybe in the first pasuk tell me that. But what is the Torah coming to teach us? The answer is, and this is really the fundamental of what we're going to speak about today, the focus is a lot more than the Chayim, the Hadgasha, meaning the enunciation, is not necessarily on the life, it's more on the choose. Be a chooser. Use free choice. Run your life with free choice. Run life with free choice. I think most people are looking and going, what does this mean? I always run with free choice. That's always what we do. I think so. Most of our life, minute to minute, and that's where the Torah is not telling you a one-time shot. Be chozer b'tshuva, one-time thing. B'char t'v'chaim. Oh, I was Mekayim the pasuk. No, it's telling you day to day, hour by hour, that a person has to go ahead and choose life, to make a decision and choose it, to do something, to do an effective something that chooses. Now, most people think, I choose all the time. I'm cold outside. I'm a hot day outside. I go into some 7-Eleven or Makolit, depending where you're located. I walk in there, and then I see a mivchar, a choice of different things to choose from the ice creams. I can get the vanilla with the chocolate nuggets inside. Maybe I'll get some cookies and cream, or maybe I'll just get the ice cream sandwich with the white and the black inside of it. I'm choosing. Wow, this is great. Free choice. This is really exciting. That's not what we call free choice. That's not defined as what we mean when we speak about free choice. That's what we call personal preference. That's taking of preference. Free choice, the definition of something that has to do with free choice, has to do when you have a arachim, something that has a foundation, something of something fundamental, a fundamental of what it is, a proper decision of something that is of importance. When a person has to make a decision whether yes to do something or not to do it, that's when a person, I'll go before we get to religious things. A person's on a diet. So here we have, and now you have a choice to make a proper choice. Here it is, the chocolate cake is sitting in front of you on the counter. It's sitting in front of you. Your husband just had 3 pieces. And now it's time, it's not fair. Why can't I have a piece? And you know what? You look at the chocolate cake, and it's not even perfect. It's it's all squared off like an unperfect. I'm just going to make it even square. I just want to make it perfect in a nice straight line. That's all. And I can take a proper piece. I'm just going to sliver off because it doesn't look so aesthetic when you have a diagonal cake. So obviously, I'm just going to take one piece to do it. And then one piece, as we might know, leads to the second, and maybe the third. But as long as no one's looking, you're okay. It's not a big deal. That is what we call choosing. That's called free choice. Free choice comes when I have to decide between one erech and another erech, one important thing or another important thing. Is it a kedai to do it, or is it not a kedai to do it? And the bottom line of what we're saying is the idea that most of our lives we're presented with choices, and follow me, this is really the fundamental of everything. I'm just saying it right in the beginning. We're presented with choices, but we don't choose. We really don't choose. You know why? Because most of the time we just work by circumstances. We just do things the way we've always been doing it. In English we say status quo. I usually just do what I do because that's always what I've been doing. An action, reaction, that's just the way I have been. Now the truth is, we're not denying. Obviously, we know there's a big chakira, as they say, introspection, amongst the psychologists, but it's also in the Torah. The Rambam brings it in a few places, in Hilchot Deyot over here, brings it in Perek Bet. Is a person because of nature or because of nurture? As we all know, all of us have certain natural habits. We have natural tendencies. We have natural traits, which we were more or less born with. Some people are just push-up more lazy than others. Some people are just bigger hotheads than others, just have a bigger temper than other people. It's just the way the world is. It's just the way the world is. It's fine. Even if we go into the Shalom Bayit world, in general, this is in general, we're not making klalim, but we know that a woman will be more on the regish side and the emotional understanding side and connecting to a person to another, as opposed to the man will be much more on the seichel side, on the cognitive side. On the cognitive side, more working according to structure, black and white, a little bit more into that. That's classically like we all know, but I'm just using that as a proof that we see everybody has tendencies based on, you want to call it hormones, you want to call it emotions, it's really what we call mazalot, what a Kadosh Baruch Hu decided everyone's going to get. Everybody has their nisayon, their deal that they have to come to the world with, and therefore we're all born with our different traits, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's of course the nature side, and there's also the nurture side, which is of course we're all born in different places. People who are born in England are not necessarily people who are born in New York. They just have different factors, and not necessarily people who are born in Israel. We'll stop here, no comments. Okay, everybody is born with different types of traits, and it comes also with the fact that you're surrounded by society, and therefore you might have certain different tendencies because of that. Knowing this, by the way, is important. This is not our subject, but knowing this is important in understanding people. It helps a tremendous amount in Shalom Bayit, but you know what? It helps with your neighbors. It helps with the country that you live in. Knowing that people were pashut raised differently. It's okay. Everybody has a certain tendency to have different tendencies, and everybody is working on the trait that they need to work on. Yes, if you go, I have a certain person, a friend of mine who teaches in a seminary, so he likes to bother the girls. So, these are girls who are fresh off the boat from modern schools, and they come. So he one time told me, he got the Klaus Rowdy. He liked to do it. So he said one time he mentioned about the people who scream Shabbos on the cars when they go across the street. Maybe you haven't experienced it in Aleph, but maybe in other parts of Ramat Shemesh you might be able to see something like that. But anyway, so he was mentioning that. Does that bother you? And they go, yes, it's not nice. Why are they screaming at other people? Let everyone do their own thing. It's inappropriate. Why do you have to do it? So he says, it does bother them. It eeks them that another person is driving on Shabbos through our streets and this. He goes, who cares? You have to have an understanding in this. So he said to them, what if I was eating a Nestle Crunch, and I finished it, I wrapped up the thing, and whoop, I just threw it backwards over my head on the sidewalk right behind me. Right? What would you say about that? You jerk! Right? What are you doing? How could you do that? That's not nice. Why would you do that? I'm on a bus, and maybe you have a couple popsicle sticks, and you kind of just leave it on the floor. Right? It would disturb. That's not nice. I'd rather vote for a good mayor just for littering. Right? That was a little plug for the mayor. Right? Just because of littering. Right? There wasn't a plug pro necessarily. Okay? But anyways, that's not why. What's wrong? Why, when it comes to littering, do you have no understanding for the person? When it comes to, if I could say, Shabbos to an extent, then you don't have an understanding. Then you do understand the person crossing. And the answer is, I'm telling you, a big chunk is how you grew up. To a certain extent, if you grew up that this is something that hurts, it's painful, and when someone hurts you on an open wound, so you say, ouch, and yes, it hurts to a certain extent. So that's kind of what we say, nature and nurture. The Rambam, Beferish, writes both of these. He says a person is raised in a certain way in this, and it's fine. And we have to understand how other people are, and everybody's working at their own pace. And there's a great tool for Mechila on Yom Kippur when you have issues with someone, because you have to realize not everyone sees the same vision as the way you might have grown up. Everybody's wearing different glasses. But the real focus I wanted to mention, and this is really fundamental, is we have to have a life of choices. Even after our tendencies, don't do things only because of circumstances. Because that's just the way I've always done things. You understand? Usually there's a certain chain reaction. If you pay attention to yourself, and I'm talking now cheshbon and nefesh before Yom Kippur. We could have spoken about this from the beginning of Elul. If you pay attention, usually I'm giving you an example. There's 100 examples I can give. You have, let's say, 2 children. There's the cutie pie child that you really like, and he's such a sweetie pie, and she's so cute and all that, right? There's that other one. And there's a kid who gets under your skin, who's a little bit annoying here and there, that you have a little bit of a shorter temper with. And sometimes you'll find that your automatic reaction to the second child is different from the automatic reaction of the first child. And it's not fair. They could both do the same thing, but when they're bothering you when you're ready to go to bed, you're like, okay, enough, no, we'll talk tomorrow. But to the other child, you're like, yes, honey, what do you need? A person has to make a cheshbon before you do that and say, am I always reacting in a specific way? Am I always reacting in a specific way for a reason? If there's any signals, I'll know to the fan if you want, by the way. Okay, that's always a question. It's a very important idea because you don't realize how much we don't make our free choices. We just automatically do things because of our society, because of our parents, because of our friends, because of our conditions. Yes, when we were teenagers, we much more did it. It was much more accentuated, as we all can see from our cute little teenager friends, children, right? As we all know. But we do it also nowadays. It happens many times. When a person is late, and I'll use this in 2 contexts for the men and the women. When a person is late for davening, he comes late to shul per se. Usually, it's an interesting phenomenon. They will always end up coming late no matter what time davening is. In other words, davening is at 8 o'clock, they come in 8:15. Suddenly, davening changed to 7, they turn to 7:15. One second. What happened here? 7:15? I understand. So they make davening later. It's now 8:30. They come 8:45. Whoa. I understand. What's your problem? You have trouble waking up at 8, you have to be 8:15. Okay, we'll make the davening 8:30, everything's good. And suddenly, no, because it's a certain natural tendency, that's just what I do. So kacha ani oseh. Now, if I could transfer it over to the women, right? Sometimes I will, or skip davening per se, or if I do it, I'll hit the chatzos button, boom, right by chatzos. I'll try to make it the last minute and try to get into Shmona Esrei before it passes the 1 minute, and then, as I had to a little bit, Beinish Moshes on chatzos, maybe there's some type of something in the middle. Always trying to get in a little bit to be able to do it. Maybe make that your first priority. That's a nice Kabbalah to make before Yom Kippur. To go ahead and make it the first thing I do in the day. Now we all have kids, we have priorities. Everybody has cheshbon nefesh. Individual questions, always individual questions, of course. But the idea is not just to say, I'm going to just do this from now on. It's going to go, do I do this all the time because I always do it? Have I ever really made a free choice about the fact that I'm davening? Or maybe it's time for me to think, what am I doing and why is it happening? And maybe it's time to actually make a choice and change that kriyut, change that thing that I always tend to be doing. Another good example, I think, is if someone had a hard day. He went to work, came back, had a very hard day, had a hard day with the kids. We all understand this. We're all in the same boat. We all go through these things. We all have our hard days in this. But you have to remember, it doesn't mean it's poetic license to be short-nibbed and grouchy and get mad at your husband on the spot or to get irritated at the kids for every little thing that they do. It comes up once in a while, but it doesn't mean you have a poetic license to do it. Maybe you have to think, maybe I'm grouchy right now because I had a tough day. Could be. So maybe why should I be grouchy? Just because I had a tough day, that's an excuse for me now to be upset? Maybe it's something to make a decision and say, I'll try to work on it. I'll give them a warning. I'll say, watch out, Ima's not in a good mood. Maybe I'll try to do something like that to make sure I can get ahead. But at the same time, it does. If you think ahead, 2 steps before you open the door and walk in the house, it'll change things around. It's called free choice. I'm trying to free choice. Free choice? What do you mean? We always do b'chira choshev. Everybody has free choice. But think about it. How many times during the day are you presented with an opportunity of free choice and you don't use it? You just do it because that's just the way I've always been doing it. Okay, that's an important idea, which the examples can come up endlessly. We can come up with a tremendous amount of examples. I'm not going to get into over amount of examples, but I'm not at all speaking about anyone specifically in this room at all, but I'm just saying when it comes to the idea of tznius. Now, most people dress in a certain way because it's just the way I've always dressed. I've always been like that. But have I been pushing boundaries? Have I been doing that? Again, I'm speaking to the camera, to anyone. It's not relevant at all. But have I been doing that? So a lot of times a person will just do it because it's just always the way that I've been doing it, and that's what it is. So a person has to be very careful to make sure to use his free choice, and you don't realize how far this can come. I'm going to use more examples. I'm going to shelve it now because I'm going to use more. If I could use a traumatic example soon. I use very simple examples now. Soon we're going to get to a little bit more serious examples, but I first want to give a little bit of background into this idea. Now, first of all, in classic psychology, everything in psychology is a machloket, disagreement, so nothing is a perfect science here, what I'm about to say. But this is definitely a Freudian way of thinking, 100%. Now I know Freudian is not, there's neo-Freudian, there's all these different types of way of thinking, but there is a certain amount of reality that they hold that this is true. And this is what I'm coming to counteract. I know Rav Wolbe speaks about this. And enough of psychologists hold that really, if I would, now first of all, it's like this. The natural world as we know it, right? The whole natural world as we know it is very, very predictable. Extremely predictable. The seasons are more or less predictable. A little bit less, a little bit no. We know when the rains fall. We know when the sun shines. We know basically how things are going to happen. We know what gravity is. We know the idea of conservation of energy. There are laws of nature which are consistent. Period. Pashut. Simple. Obviously. Even animals, which you would think, animals, they can predict their migration to a tool, to the day almost. They always know exactly when the birds are flying south. They know exactly when the whales are swimming up north. They can always predict everything. That's why they're able to catch them in everything that they do. They're very predictable. Everything. It's incredible. There's a mitzvah of shiluach haken that we know to send away a mother bird. And there's always 2 eggs. Did you know this? There's always 2 eggs. And always it's 1 male and 1 female. Say that for democracy, huh? That's incredible, very capitalistic. Everything is always a male and a female egg. Everything in nature is extremely predictable. Extremely not. What about people? People are wild. They're off the wall. They're just so unpredictable. You don't know your neighbor from your husband, from maybe your kids. We all know, B'ezrat Hashem, you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. You can have a good number of kids. They're being raised by the same 2 parents. And here you have it. You have Dr. Jekyll and right? You have 2 extremely different type of children. How is that possible? They're being raised in the same society by the same parents. The answer is, of course, what we spoke before. Everybody has their own tchunot, and everybody seems to be extremely different. It's very unpredictable, right? So that is a vote for free choice. However, many of the modern psychologists hold that if you would be able to get them on a CAT scan and see exactly how they grew up in the situations that they were, and be able to figure out their genes and their hormones, and figure out exactly what the nature of this person is. Is he a little bit more angry, a little bit lazy, a little bit this, a little bit that? You could take all the different meters of a person, a little bit more of a depressed kind of this. You could figure that all out. You would be able to predict 100% if this guy's going to be a ganav, a thief, or if he's going to be the gadol hador, he's going to be a big professor, or he's going to be a big rabbi, or he's going to be a doctor, he's going to be a guy who's going to be a serial murderer. More or less, he's predictable, which means more or less they kind of take the whole free choice out of the ballpark, which of course we know. Not that I recommend necessarily going to a psychiatrist, unless it's necessary. Everybody has to ask their questions. But many times, a lot of what happens to a person will be kind of blamed on someone above you, okay? Maybe it's your parents, or maybe some situation, or because of this, which sometimes could be good, but sometimes not. It depends, and again, I'm not going into this thing. But all I'm trying to say is this is what the Rambam is going over and over. He speaks about this in so many places. In Chut Shuva over here he speaks about it. In Chut Deyot he speaks about it. In Shmona Prakim he speaks about it over and over. We do not believe this phenomenon. People are 100% free choice. I on purpose quoted that story in the beginning, even though it's an extreme story. Moshe Rabbeinu is the man of mans. He is the Navi of Nevi'im. I understand he was born. He's everything. He's everything. And here he is, Kebiyachol, according to this Midrash, admitting that no, he wasn't born Mr. Perfect. He made himself perfect. He's the one who got himself to that place, which we will never do, but we can know what we're aiming for. That means that it's all within our power. It's an incredible tool that we have, and it's chaval to waste it. And yes, I want to say the majority of the population does waste it. The majority of the population doesn't utilize free choice. Too many people are busy following society, making protests because just everyone else is protesting. They don't even know what they're protesting about, but they're just going to do it because that's what we're doing. And a person has to stop, look, and listen, and appreciate this beautiful present that you are giving that we call free choice. And it's something that you have to stop and appreciate and utilize it sometimes. Take a choice one time in a day, sometimes once in a week, and think and stop and think for a second. Am I really making a free choice? Am I really doing it the way I'm supposed to be doing? This is a very important lesson which we could be figuring out. If a person would do that, that's the idea of making a Kabbalah, of making a change, of being able to do it. Free choice is not an optical illusion. It's not as if, it's not like that. It's real. It's a phenomenon. It's something that's there. I remember when we first moved here to Mapei Shemesh, 25 years ago, when this was a mountain. There was nothing here. And, we were one of the first people in the building. And someone knocks on our door, and they were checking the mamad rooms. You know, the mamad rooms, the steel rooms that we have in each one of the things. And he came in to say, for a fee, he's happy to check the mamad room. So we weren't sure to pay the money to check the mamad room. What do we have to check? He says, the kablanim always cut corners, and it's not going to be a safe place to live. He says, it's not safe. He says, for a fee, we'll make sure I'll check your mamad room, and you can do it. Anyways, I broke into a discussion. He wasn't a religious person, so I broke into a discussion, He's a young chatan, trying to think that very, ideal. So I wanted to speak to him about different things. And he actually, when I was talking to him about God, or the idea, he said, well, I'm really just a fatalist. I believe in fate. Everything just happens, and whatever happens to a person, nothing is not within. He didn't believe in free choice at all. Whatever was meant to happen automatically happens. It sounds good. No, whatever was meant to happen, that's not what he meant, right? He understands that automatically things are going to happen, and everything's fatali. That's how they say it in Hebrew. That everything is automatically fair. That was the conversation we had. So, anyways, we're talking. He goes, so do I want to take him? I said, well, the truth is, if fate is just going to happen anyway, so I'd have to fix my mamud anyways. Anyway, so whatever's going to happen to me is going to happen to me. So he kind of lost the div. No, we didn't. Our mamad room is still broken. But the Seder, it's okay. So far, 25 years, we had one explosion here. We've been okay. Believe me, we are. But Kopadim, we see that there is such a phenomenon of understanding there's something called free choice and to appreciate it. There is a example, which I saw a mashal once with Noach Weinberg. I'm not going to use this example. I'll say a real story, which I know from a friend of mine, of a person. This was a somewhat relative of his, a somewhat distant uncle or something like that. A person who was very poor. And this just brings out strongly what I'm saying. He didn't have very much money. He worked very hard. Yom Kippur, a good person, worked hard. At the age of 65, he was already doing his pension, and he found out, and then it was nidgaleh to him. For some reason, some people do this thing. It was hidden to him that really 20 years ago, one of his parents or one of his relatives, I don't know who it was exactly, left to him about $10 million. He had $10 million for 20 years in the bank, which he never knew about. And here he was working like a dog for the past 20 years. True story, the guy couldn't believe it. He was taken by such surprise and he committed suicide. He was so upset about the situation. Here I was working like this and this and that. I don't think he was Jewish, by the way. I'm not sure if he was Jewish. I'm just taking that on the side. But it doesn't matter. The story doesn't matter. The idea is the mashal. You have an otzer, you have a gold mine within you, and you don't use it. That's depressing. It's upsetting. You have this cherished thing that we call free choice to be able to use it. You have the capability to be able to use it and to leave it there unused, unturned, just to do everything just because I've always been doing it, not to make the change, not to utilize the free choice for what it's worth. So that's a real chaval. It's a chaval that a person should leave it to such an extent. Okay, that's this idea that I really feel is important to bring out. The Rambam brings over here in Tshuva also, he brings another idea. We know that the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem. A person is very important because he's built with a Tzelem Elokim. And over there the Mishnah explains that Nodalo Shenivra B'Tzelem is a Tzelem Elokim. What is a Tzelem Elokim? So says the Rambam, Ki Adamu Echad Mimenu Ledat Tov Ra. Free choice. Why are we a Tzelem Elokim? We always think about this incredible feat that we have that we're Tzelem Elokim. And we always wonder what makes us a Tzelem Elokim, an image of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The way we look like Hashem. It doesn't sound so right? It doesn't sound like it. The Tzelem Elokim is we have free choice. We are the only existent being in this world that has free choice. Animals don't have free choice. Everything is nature, like we spoke out. Everything is natural. Kadosh Baruch Hu did a miracle. Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem was the only thing with free choice. He's the only thing, or whatever you want to call it, with free choice. And here he is. He made a being that also has the power of free choice, this potential that we were given in order to do it. It's an incredible potential that we're utilized for. We're able to use our intelligence for incredible things. Incredible things what a person can do. Every time I fly on an airplane, I look out the window and I'm absolutely marveled by this edifice. It's an incredible thing. This thing, you wouldn't be able to pick up a tire on a tire, let alone the hundreds of people, the luggage, the weight of this thing, and who the heck is picking this machine up? Who's picking up this machine? Where is it? It's flying in the air. Air pressure is building up. It's a course that we call flight. They imbalance the air pressure and it's able to pick up the wings, and all of a sudden, this whole tank is able to fly up into the air. This is an incredible thing that they created. I just look at it and I'm marveled by it, but we're kind of just used to it, so we don't really appreciate it so much. But you see the power of man, what we're able to do with our free choice. The incredible things that is under our fingertips. I'm not getting into space shuttle because I still haven't gotten one. Maybe soon Musk will let me go on one. But Bikaran, that's an incredible thing that we're able to accomplish. And therefore, a person has to appreciate these powers that we have. I saw one time in a cutting of a newspaper from Rav Pincus, right after he passed away. He said this almost in Nevuah. Now, Rav Pincus passed away right before the Twin Towers. He passed out in 2001, a little bit before the Twin Towers. And over there they bring a story, an interesting story, which overrides what I'm saying over here. I mean, it's similar to what I'm saying over here. They say that when he was in New York, he was in New York giving some shiurim, and he was walking around in Manhattan. And he said, and when he was there, he was looking at the tremendous skyscrapers that were there, appreciating it. And he said, similar to what I was saying about an airplane just now, incredible. He was looking at, man can build such a structure, 120 stories high, just an absolute incredible edifice. How do they get in and so stable and so there and it's able to stand alone and appreciate and look at an airplane? This is Mamish, I'm telling you, this was written 4 months before the Twin Towers crashed. I'm not kidding, this is when he said this piece. And he said, you looked at the airplanes and say, wow, incredible how they can create such things. And then he said, after he finished rubbernecking, looking up at the top of the skyscraper, he looked down, and then he looked at the man who created these towers, he goes, it doesn't fit, like something's wrong. He was talking about the person and the way they act, or the certain way the society, they don't act like the thing that the incredible things that they're able to build, but they don't act like you would think that they should be based on this incredible thing that they're able to do. And he brought a story from the Chofetz Chaim. Said the Chofetz Chaim during World War I was in his house, and he was learning in his house, and he had a granddaughter. It was known he had a granddaughter that everyone, like the Enlightenment movement, the Haskalah, that she was taken to the Haskalah. She was out in university, and she was not religious. Many times they were being swept away, as we know back then. And anyway, she came to her grandfather, the Chofetz Chaim, during World War I. So this is about when he was in an elderly age. He was probably in his 70s, in his mid-70s. This is the Chofetz Chaim, I remind you. And she came to him and she goes, Grandpa, Saba, Zaidi, Ad Matai, until when are you going to stay in the dark? When are you going to get out into the light, into the real world? Chofetz Chaim, say it to me, don't say to the Chofetz Chaim. Okay. His granddaughter said that to him. When is the time that you're going to finally get out and go out into the real world? Smell the coffee. Get out. Why are you just stuck in here behind these old decrepit books? It's time to get into the real world. That's what he said. So he took his lovely granddaughter to the window, and he pointed out to the window. Now back then, like you said, it was in the middle of World War I. So there were these, if you've ever seen the little black and white flicks about these things, there were these little biplanes, like that, you know, with the guys with the cap and two people in the back, flying the little planes that were flying with the propellers. So you had to, right? And they were flying the plane. There was one guy flying, and there was a guy in the back seat with little dynamite sticks. Boom, no dynamite sticks. And that's how they were, you know, in the middle of a world war. That's what part of the way of the world. They were dropping dynamite sticks. He says, see those planes? One day those planes are going to land on the moon. He said, trust me, one day those planes are going to land on it. See those dynamite sticks? One day those bombs are going to be destroyed, it can destroy the whole entire world. They will have power to destroy the entire world. He says, and he said in Yiddish, that's what they make. That's what they're machen. Aber mir machen Menschen. But we make people. But we are busy making people. We're busy trying to build a person. They're building devices, things which could be good, and it's utilized. But it's busy, that can be used for the wrong things also, the atomic bomb. But we are busy building up a person. That's what we're trying to do. Building up a person means taking a free choice, thinking, what am I doing wrong, and how can I make a change? How many times am I reacting, acting in the same way just because that's the way I've been doing it all the time? To go ahead and make a difference in the world, to be able to do what I can do. Now, I'm going to get to the second step. It won't take too long, don't worry. This one might be a little bit more disputable. I'm going to show you based on the Rambam and many writings from many. Rabbi Noach Weinberg used to speak about this, but Rabbi Yerucham Lubavitz and others. This one, I think not everybody might agree 100%, but you'll see if you follow me to the end that it has a truth to it also. When we're discussing again the power of free choice. We live especially it's always been around for a long time, but we live especially in a world of addictions. Addictions, okay? We know addictions are a horrific thing that gets to a certain part in our brain, and sometimes a person, yes, he gets addicted to certain things. In the olden days, Seder, it was drinking, maybe a little bit more with a cigarette, and of course now it's gotten worse and worse. It's upped its ante to drugs, to internet, to all different types there's every type of, it used to be just Alcoholics Anonymous, now there's every other letter in the book. To people for rehab and returner is as a backup. It's not, there's addictions is something that's very, unfortunately, too much of, as they say. And the reason is because if everything is available, suddenly you become addicted to it. That's the real answer. Back in the olden days, people had a certain amount of self-discipline, and that's what it was. Nowadays, we're not taught self-discipline. We're not raised with self-discipline. It's anti-democratic to have self-discipline. You're supposed to be into things for yourself. That's why you have that many people making these protests in Tel Aviv, because they want to be in charge of themselves. They don't want people telling them what to do. There's a certain idea that we know called internet. And listen to this, yes, free choice also applies to addictions. I tell you this with a cup of salt, with a grain of salt, and you have to hear it to the end. But yes, even with a person who is addicted to a certain extent, if a person does what we're about to explain, and again, I take this from the Sfarim, I'm not saying my own things, okay? But if a person takes us to the extent, even an addiction can be chosen to stop it, to limit it, to avoid it, to get around from it. Free choice, bechira chavshi. Doesn't make sense to a certain extent that Hashem would give us a special thing called free choice, and we wouldn't have free choice, that He would take it away from us. Sometimes He did it by paro, He took it away as a punishment, etc. But that's not what we're discussing. And that is a very important concept. Most people think, I'll say it over with a story from Rav Shach. Rav Shach was one time asked by a person, he said, why is it that every time I'm a Kabbalah Achlata decision, especially before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, I try to make a certain decision, it's always hard for me to stick with it. I always have difficulty sticking with it. Why am I not able to be able to stick with it? That's what he asks. So said Rav Shach, and he spoke at a mice about himself, he says, most people are making a decision, are making a mistake. They think that the reason why you fall after making a decision is because of a circumstance that happened, what we call actualizing a decision. You made a decision, later on something happens, I fell into the trap again. I couldn't do it. He says it's not a mistake that happened afterwards. It's a mistake that happened at the time you made the decision. If you made the decision the way it was supposed to make, if you made a hachlata, a full-fledged investment with a commitment, with a conviction, that's the perfect word here, with a conviction that this is what I'm going to do, then yes, even when the circumstances come up afterwards, you will be able to avoid it. Lo aleinu v'lo aleichem, it should never happen. When a person has to go to the hospital because chas v'shalom, they had something that they were diagnosed with, Rahman al-Asad, and they have to do radiation, or minan. If such a thing happens, the person will not have trouble waking up in the morning. They will make sure to be there on time for the appointment. They will make sure to be there. They won't get lazy on you. They won't kind of round off corners. They'll do what needs to do. Why? Because this is something one has to do. Right? This is something that needs to be done. And if it needs to be done, I will do it. When something knows and someone's convinced that this is the right thing to do, then he will do it, and he will do it ad sof. The difference is, and again, I don't speak to any individual here at all, I'm speaking to everyone, and I 100% include myself, and I'm not just trying to say that to be like an honor or something, I mean I'm including myself also, and that is that the problem is faltered in the commitment in the decision in the first place. We're not committing it in the original decision. I'll try. I'm saying, I know I'm having trouble with brachot. I always make them levatala. I throw them out. Or I say the wrong bracha. I don't know. I'll say it. Bli neder. I'll try. B'ezrat Hashem, I'm going to try to do it. No. Rav Shach said an example about himself, and I actually heard it even before I saw the story. He said about himself, Rav Shach used to smoke cigarettes. He used to smoke cigarettes. Oh, well, look, wow, Rav Shach, he was a gadol. First of all, I want to point out, Rav Shach was born in 1898, and he died in 2001. He lived out 3 centuries. Pretty impressive. He lived to 103 years old. That's not a vouch for cigarettes, okay? That's not what I meant to do. But what I meant to say is he was smoking when he was younger. As we all know, cigarettes were a beseder gomer. On the contrary, if you look in the books, cigarettes were considered healthy. It was good for you to smoke a cigarette. Have a cigarette, it's good for you, relax. Now the truth is, so to speak, it is good to relax with a cigarette. I'm not saying, I'd never smoked in my life, don't worry, I'm not even saying that, right? Now we all know, around the 30s and the 40s, we found out, wow, this causes lung cancer, this is not good. The 50s, the 60s, it started coming out, and everyone started realizing this is killing people. It's making people amputate legs, this is not good. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look at any cigarette box. There's a lot of cute pictures over there of what it does to a person, and we all know, and that's why, Baruch Hashem, none of us are smoking. But what I'm trying to say is that's why he did it. Rav Shach said in the 50s, when it was finally decided, Nimnu v'gamru, when it was decided, and he was already 50 years old at the time that it was decided that cigarette smoking is not good for you, he stopped on the dime. On the dime, he was smoking over a pack. He said he smoked on the dime. The next day he didn't. So it was a little bit hard, but I did it. He stopped on the dime. He stopped smoking 100%. How is that possible? Why? It must be, because he learns a lot of Torah. It's also true. I agree, it's also true. But it was the commitment. It's a person who knows discipline. A person knows this is what needs to be done. He does it. The decision, it's not because he bumped into a cigarette in the wrong, never bumped into another cigarette. No, he knew this is what needs to be done. He had 100% conviction that this is what has to be done. And it was done, finished, finito. That was it. It was done because that's what, and that's what had to happen. And therefore it had to be, I'll tell you another story. There was a person who was in America in a market. He was in a market. Now we all know in the markets, they're very nice to us. And by the checkout counter, when you're going to pay, they give you a big line of chocolates and sweets and all these geschmacka things on the way out. Why? Because, and they do it very intelligently. It's usually about a height, right around here, because that's the height of the kid who's in the stroller when you're pushing him in the way, right? So he can all he has to do is just reach, and he's got it. Doesn't have to do much. It's perfect. Really, psychology is incredible. If you ever go and study markets, they're very impressive. They put the milk and the bread, which is the basic necessities, all the way in the back because they want you to walk through the whole entire market and pick up some things on the way. They put the candies and the chocolate right in the front counter because it's not the thing that you go shopping for. So they know that on the way you'll be able to pick up something on the way and do you a favor. Anyways, so when so a person was here in a market in America. And he saw the lady behind him, who had her son next to him, and he started asking her for some treats. Now I have to point this out, and I'm saying that in a stereotype way. She was a colored lady. Okay, she was not a Jewish lady. She saw she was black. She was not a Jewish lady. He knew she was not Jewish. And the child was asking. He said, "No." She said, "No, you can't." He said, "Please, Eva, can I just?" No, she not Eva. He said, "Mommy, can I please just have this?" She said, "Not kosher." What? She said, "Not kosher." So he said, "Okay," and he stops. The guy was like, 1 second. This is incredible. He couldn't believe it. He saw it happen again with something else. Not going to say, "I can't help you." I'm not usually the most talkative type of guy. He had to ask her. He said, "Excuse me, are you Jewish or like kosher? Like, is that just like 7 mitzvahs, like what they call the seven laws that they're going, what's the kosher thing?" She goes, "I don't know. I always come to the store and I see these little cute Jewish kids that are always asking for candies. The mom says, no. And then she says to him, 'Not kosher,' and they stop. And they stop here. I said, "Wow, this is a magic pill. This is incredible. Not kosher. Stop. What happened?" Well, I understand when he says, no, I said, "No," they don't listen. So he said, "Not kosher." Why? Because kosher is a no. Finished. Conviction. It's done with it. There's no black and white with it. That's it. There's no questions about it. When it comes to, I don't know, maybe, so then I could play around with mommy. I could take advantage of her. But if it's a question of is it kosher or not kosher, there's no hechsher. It's a Twinkie. You can't have it. It's full of lard. No questions. Finished. It's over. It's all a matter of decision. It's conviction. If things are hazy, then you're right. Then your Kabbalahs on Yom Kippur will not necessarily work. Which I said is not. It's okay. We all mess up. I'm not saying not to. But at least we have to know what our direction is. I'll give you another example with my own personal example, which my wife knows this example, but it's okay. But I like using this example because I think it brings it out very well. I was also in the market once, and this one's with me. And you walk through the market, and you go, in America I'm talking about, you walk through the market and you go through the sections that have non-kosher stuff, and you go right through them. I can go through the non-kosher, I don't even look twice. Old things from when you were younger, nothing, there's no questions about it. You see non-kosher things, you don't go and eat it, you have no questions. But then you go there's a line, and there's certain places in Los Angeles, I assume in New York also, you have these aisles in the market, which is the OUD section. Now this is the most painful aisle for a person to walk through if you keep Holiest Yisrael. It's incredibly painful. If you want, you can go to Best. It's good enough. It's the second class over there also. I live across the street from Best. That's good for me. But anyways, the OUD aisle, if you keep Holiest Yisrael, is extremely painful. You have to pass through the Entenmann cakes, and then see the donuts, and then see the Oreo cookies, and all these ideas, the Snicker bars, and the Hershey's, and you're like, oh wow, I can handle this. This is fine, Do we keep, I want to ask my wife, do we keep Holiest Yisrael also in America? Maybe, it's only in Israel that we keep Holiest Yisrael. Maybe over here we can pass a bill. I come from a past where I used to eat this stuff. What can I tell you? That's it. It brings a certain association. That is 20 times harder in the past. What's the difference? Twinkies are much less tastier than that, or going to a Winchell's or one of these those funny places, or McDonald's. It's less tasty? No, the answer is over here, there's a conviction, there's a decision, there's a achlata, there's no question. You don't have a havamina, there's no yetzer hara about it anymore. It's been killed. You made a decision and it's over. And that's what it's about. As opposed to when you go through, as you say, the parva section, when you go through the part that's chetzi, so over there's room for thought, there's room for messing up. There's room for a decision that wasn't 100%. There's room and a conviction for a decision I made in Yom Kippur that a week later you end up not keeping to, because it wasn't 100% fully done. It wasn't 100% fully convicted to. You understand? That is the idea. With this we have a tremendous understanding into a very difficult Rambam, because the Rambam says The Rambam says these words in Perik Bet Halacha Bet. U'ma yeh tshuva? How does a person do tshuva? Hu sheyazav ha'choteh cheto v'yasireno mimachshavato v'yigmor b'libo shelo yasenu od. He should leave the sin, admit that he's not going to do it, and say that he's not going to do it anymore. Shenemar yazav ki achrei tshuva v'yayid alav. He says a line here which everybody talks about, and they don't know what to do with this line. Well, the Rambam says you have to have an edut, a testimony from Yodei Talmud, from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, that says you're not going to go back to the sin anymore. You serious? Come on. He says, he says you have to have such a way of doing it that even a Kodesh Baruch Hu says you're not going to do it. Now we all mess up, and we all, we don't, I still have a similar list of my Kabbalah that I do for Yom Kippur. I keep it from year to year in my machzor. It's very tucked in well. Right? And we do go back to the things that we've done. I'm not saying we haven't. But what does he mean when he says, make sure Hashem does do it? He's saying what we're doing. Make the decision so positive. I'm doing a proper decision. Bechira chofshiti, so positive that this is like night and day. It's like keeping kosher. It's not a question. I'm going to do this. I have an issue with speaking Lashon Hara. I'm going to make it this time now. Now, just don't go cold turkey, so you have to make the Kabbalah intelligently, obviously. But you have to know, I have an issue with a certain thing. I'm going to make sure that now I'm not going to fall into this thing. I have an anger issue in my house. I get angry too fast, and I'm going to try to do something about it this time. When I walk in for the first hour, which is usually the time I'm most angry, I'm going to really try to do this. And then, you know what you do? You go and learn some halachot about anger. You want to do something even better? You're not going to do this. But take a video camera. Back then, video camera. Sorry. Take your smartphone, right? I'm very behind. You take your smartphone and film yourself when you walk in, when you're having an anger spell, and watch it. It's a very good thing to do. It's a very good thing to do when you're having it. Now, you'll never do it because when you're having it, nobody wants to do that. So I'll tell your husband to do it, but then you'll beat him over the head. But be'etzem, that's something that should be done. That you should watch what you do, and you'll be so positive that's the wrong thing to do, and the decision will be 100%, not 50-50. It won't be maybe ulai and it could be. You understand? That is what the Rama means. V'yazav edarko achiyayid alav Yodei Talmud. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, "Wow, you mean business. I see you really mean it over here." That's the idea of what we're trying to do. It's an interesting thing if you notice. When we make Kabbalot on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, like we said, it's hard to keep to sometimes. It's hard for us to hold on to it, and it's not so easy. But we try to do it. But if you find, and I think many of us can relate to this one, but the answer is the same as I'm speaking, a Baal Tshuva, someone who's Chozer B'Tshuva. He comes back and he's Chozer B'Tshuva. A Baal Tshuva, a real Baal Tshuva. There's Baal Tshuva and there's Baal Tshuva. We're Baal Tshuva soon, right? On every Yom Kippur, you're a Baal Tshuva. But a person who's Chozer B'Tshuva, not necessarily, of course, there's always cases and everything, but more or less, they don't go back to Surah Marah. They usually just keep to it. They don't stop keeping kosher, stop keeping Shabbat. They were Chozer B'Tshuva. That's it. They stick with it. What's the difference? Why, when I make those few decisions on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, which are a lot easier than a Baal Tshuva, start keeping kosher, Shabbat, tzniut, whoa, this is crazy, covering your hair. What crazy decisions a Baal Tshuva makes. It's unbelievable. I'm not convincing you not to. I'm just saying it was a big thing when a person made the decision. And here you are, after you do it, and you stuck to it. Kol hakavod, and kol hakavod. Baruch Hashem that you're able to do it. And when it comes to these smaller things that we make Kabbalahs, we don't. So what's the answer? What's the reason why why we're not able to do it, why we fall to the cracks? So the Rambam answers that also. In Perek Zayin, Halacha Gimel. When he talks about the idea of doing tshuva, he adds a very important thing here. He says the idea of Eina tshuva rak migezel. He says, don't think that tshuva means only if I stole, or if I did something bad, or if I screamed, or things like that, or if I did something that was off. He says not only from gezel, or from illegal things, or things that I'm not supposed to do. It's not only from those places. He says rather, a person should also be chozer from deot ra'ot, yachzor. He should be chozer b'tshuva also from deot ra'ot, even from bad midot. A person has to make sure to be chozer even from bad traits. If I have bad character traits, also that a person has to work on. Not just an action that a person does, also from a bad character trait. That is also what he's supposed to do. How can I go ahead and do such a thing? And how am I able to change a character trait? So the Rambam actually says how to do it. He actually says when you do it, you have to go ahead and come back and be oikir misharashara. Over here he says these words, Yasir mimachshavato, take it away from your mind. Okay, it's two words in the Rambam, but he says, "V'yasir mimachshavato," take it away from your way of thinking. In other words, he's saying it's not enough that I decided I won't do this action. Real tshuva, a real Kabbalah is a change of frame of mind. I have to change the way of thinking. What's the difference between a Baal Tshuva and when we go through Yom Kippur and do that type of Baal Tshuva? A Baal Tshuva changed the way of mind. I grew up in America. I don't like the philosophy. It's too free. There's no type of limitations. They overdo their lusts and desires. There is no real simcha in the boat. It's a facade. We know it's not real. You ran away from there for a reason. The world of atheism is ridiculous if that's where you came from. Everybody came from wherever they came from. You changed your mind frame. Your whole way of thinking took a 180. You understand? It switched over. And that's why you won't go back to those old ways. That's why your frame of mind was different. You switched your yasir b'machshavato. This is the only one place where the Rambam, usually the Rambam says yashuv b'tshuva. Over here he says yachzor b'tshuva, a chazara. Meaning you do a full 180. To do a proper Kabbalah on a midah, even if it's an addiction, a person can do it if he decides this is not something I want to stick to. It's not something I want to do. I want to be able to get out of it. We were all addicted to not being frum beforehand. That was my nature. That's who I was. If you want to make the change, you're able to do it, but you have to make a change of mind, a change of the frame of mind. And yes, it means all type of statuses. Some people are rabid complainers, if I could say. They're called in Hebrew nargan. Nargan, a person who is a constant complainer. And you will know that you don't realize it so much until, and it's a good thing when someone points it out to you. Chances are it's going to be your spouse, but even if it's not, but when someone points it out to you, take it as a present. It's a good thing to know that maybe I bicker too much. Choose your complaints. Today, I already complained twice. That's it. No more. No more complaints. Shut your mouth. Enough. I can stop it. Well, that's a classic thing that comes from no choice, no free choice. I just do it because automatically when I see something that irritates me, I complain about it, complain about it. Unfortunately, always everybody has reasons for everything, but a person who is very depressed on a constant basis or very upset about it, it comes from a certain place, but it doesn't mean that a person can blame the world, blame everything, blame my parents, blame my spouse, blame my kids, blame society, blame the rabbi, okay, blame whatever, right? Blame someone. You have to always blame someone. And that's not good. It's not good. Sometimes you need it to a certain extent, but that's not the way we work. That's not the way we work. A person has to take responsibility for himself and make a proper decision. Decide, why am I always like this? And go ahead to make a switch. We are people of free choice. We're a matzah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a present. Utilize it. I know that example was extreme a little bit with a guy who committed suicide, but he had an otzer of $10 million in his bank, and he never knew it. It's such a depressing story. It's so sad. You can cry from such a thing. But you're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing when we do it repeatedly, and we end up doing it. And that's why a person has to know how to take advantage of the situation and to make it that he will be able to do such a thing. Okay, so that more or less is a rundown of the yesod that I wanted to bring out here. And I think that it's an important lesson to be able to figure out. It's a lesson in everything. Shalom Bayit, myself, my children, I'm telling you everything. I remember one time, as I'm finishing basically, when I was younger also, and I used to go on the bus to the Mir with a person who was a doctor, and he was going to the Mir also. He left his job and he used to go to learn. He used to go to learn. He took a sabbatical, but for a few years, Dafka Kol Kavatim. He was making good money in the Mir Kishmoy Kenhu, a Mir salary you get, right? That's what they have. But anyway, so he was going to the Mir, and I used to sit on the bus with him, and I used to talk to him sometimes. Now look, being a Baal Tshuva, also sometimes you can be a little bit sarcastic. So he had something that bothered him. It was in the Parsha at that time, and he found it always humorous to say that Rivka, we all know the story with Rivka, and she took care of Eliezer with the water and pouring and feeding camels, running home, and she got engaged. And how old was she? The ripe old age of 3 years old. He was very ridiculous. He didn't like these things. I understand, some things that we would say with a grain of salt. He was a little bit more, come on, man, at 3 years old, you can't be serious. This is like, he was like humorous. He was laughing at the idea. So I remember talking to a Talmid Chacham about it, someone who is now a proper Talmid Chacham. He was a good friend of mine. He was a very intelligent person. Also a Baal Tshuva. And he said something so true, which is everything we're basically saying now. It all depends on how you raise the kids, to a certain extent. Now, I don't recommend doing this, the way they raised Rivka. I don't necessarily recommend doing that. That's not what I mean. But I mean to say that if you compare, and it's an easy comparison here, you could do even now, you compare how we raise children, let's say in America, to how they might raise children in Israel. Already, as we know, at the ripe old age of 6 years old, she's crossing the street with a 3-year-old brother. Why not, right? Now again, I'm not pro. I'm not saying that's good. Don't ever take me for, I'll get hit over for these. That's not what I meant. But it comes from a certain maturity because they're raised in a certain place. Again, I'm not pro this. We didn't do it, right? My wife is here. We did not do this. It would kill me to say, you made it sound like we did. No, we didn't do this. That's not what I meant. I just meant to say that there's a certain maturity that comes out. People speak about this. Like, I know the Makar people, they always say it's ridiculous. People have 10 kids and this and that. Look at the older kids in a 10-kid family, how responsible they are, how achrei, they know how to help babysit. They know how to help take kids, they know how to cook, they know how to be, they're so much more responsible. In Kol Kavod, my wife has made this joke also, certain relatives that I have, they have their 2 kids, they're like, wow, how do you have 8 kids? Oh my God, 2 is crazy. I can't handle 2, they're making me meshuggah, I'm going crazy and can't do it. They say, yeah, if I had your 2 kids, I also wouldn't be able to handle it either. Baruch Hashem, I'd rather have 8 of mine and not 2 of yours. That's the emes. Because the way they are raised is a certain type of immaturity, or if you want to say spoiledness, or a certain thing that they're not ripened yet until they get older and older and older. Maybe when they get to 36, they're ready to get married. Okay? Maybe. But that's what I'm saying. It all depends in a certain manner. So this Rivka, she was raised, we know 100 years ago, that they were already starting to work 10, 11 years old. That's it. You get on the field, get your sandals out there, and get the hoe and start digging. We all know that they're already responsible at that age. So back then, that's what it was. And it's a real answer. It's a true answer. That's how they were raised. Now, again, nowadays we don't do these things. That's what I meant to say. But it's all a matter of how a person takes the law into his hands. It's your decision. It's a free choice. Bottom line, I said no chidushim, nothing new. I spoke about free choice. Free choice. When you go home and say, so what did your husband ask you? What do you speak about? You spoke about free choice. God, that's it? Was there anything exciting to speak about? No, the amount of conviction that a person can take, if a person realizes what he has, and the choice is here, not just in making a decision, I won't speak Lashon Hara anymore, I won't do it. And the way to do it, and this is the Ikar of Ikar, and the Vilna Gaon writes in a few places, is not just learning Musar, which is good, we all learn Musar, women learn Musar, it's very important, learning Halacha. Learn the Halachas of Lashon Hara. If you have to do it, now don't get into over details, but when you learn how severe it is, you learn how bad it is. Or you know what? Don't just learn halachas. Read a few stories about how people got damaged by Lashon Hara. I'd give you right now a few stories if I had time. It's over. The bell's ringing already. But just read about a few stories about how bad it is. And then when you make that decision, it'll be real. You'll live it. It'll be from here. It won't be a one-time decision to say, okay, Yom Kippur's coming, so bleed out. I'm going to be more tzenua from now on. I'm going to be more tzenua. Think about what it's causing. Read how bad it is, or the son that it does. Or if I could say, everybody has their issues. If it's the men or the women, each one has their issues. But women can have an internet addiction to social media. That's usually a bigger problem with the men and the women. Men have other issues. But the social media, one can be stuck in it and going on it and again and again and again. I'm not referring to anyone specific here. Again, I have no idea. It's not at all. But the idea is that, you're stuck, or you have to always see these things. I have people that they have 100% filters, everything's clean, everything's there, but they're just stuck on the screen every time. You get this clip and that clip and this clip and this clip, and then the next thing you know, it's 1 a.m. and you don't have, and you're so tired in the morning, you don't have patience for your children to help them out. Because why do that? Why can a person make a commitment to say, this will not be done? I know how bad it is, I'm going to make a decision not to do it. Pick that one thing and go with it out of self. Realize how bad it is. Study it for the past year, all the damage that it's caused. I'm talking about all the things that we've mentioned. And B'ezrat Hashem, that will be the koach to be able to get to such an extent that a person will be able to get that far. It's an incredible thing. I think it's a very big tool. And if a person realizes that he's able to do it, then he will be able to reach that thing. B'ezrat Hashem, we shall have a Gemara Chatima Tova. This Yom Kippur should be the Yom Kippur where the Geula should come because of our Kabbalat. And if everybody makes one Kabbalah, then we'll make the whole entire share worth it. B'ezrat Hashem. Mine is pushing it.